Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, you know I love having my veterans on, and this gentleman is a true American hero. Two-time Gold Star recipient, Army, Ranger. I mean, he's done it all. And not only that, he's also a serial entrepreneur. So he's done great things in uniform and even better things out of uniform. I'm so welcome. I'm so happy to be able to talk to this gentleman. And we're just going to have fun today. And if you want to know what crypto is, what the hell the metaverse even is, he's going to be dropping all kinds of knowledge. Randall, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, Rich, I really appreciate you having me. I mean, I got to take a moment and say thank you for everything that you're doing. You know, it remains to be seen, you know, which times are better, you know, in or out of uniform. They're certainly different. Sometimes I feel like I'm still fighting for my life, you know, even in the boardroom. But, you know, whenever I get a chance to, you know, as we talked about, you know, break bread, you know, have a cup of coffee, talk to a fellow veteran, you know, talk to people who are out there, you know, that have worn the uniform, supported the flag, supported each other. That's the biggest honor. I think that so many people, we get wrapped up in our own daily lives and we forget to kind of reach back, you know, pull people forward, reach down, lift people up. And this is what, you know, shows like this are all about, you know, reaching people who sometimes feel like maybe no one's listening, or maybe need that little bit of push, that little bit of inspiration, or just the camaraderie. And that's what it's all about. So I am honored to be here. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. First of all, you know, where'd you come from? Where'd you grow up? And how'd you become the man that you are today?
Oh man, you know, amazing parents, and no matter what you believe, you know, hopefully you believe in something greater than yourself. So, you know, we won't get into, you know, religious politics or sex unless we want to, but, you know, hopefully, you know, something greater than us exists out there. And so I give all the credit to that. You know, I didn't grow up wanting to be in the military. I didn't, my grandfather was in the Navy. My dad was in the Navy. You know, back in kind of the Vietnam era, you know, it wasn't something that was part of our household, but through a kind of random sequence of events, you know, got exposed to West Point in high school. And one of those things, and I know we're going to talk about resiliency later, but, you know, one of those things for me that I always think about is I never want to be presented with a challenge that I turn my back on. And I don't want to turn my back on opportunities to help. And sometimes that's helping yourself by facing those tough things, those tough challenges. And so I'll be honest, my first instinct was like, I don't want to go to a military academy. I'm going to go to UT, party, have a good time. I was already accepted.
Hook 'em hard, baby.
There you go. You know, and I was like, well, I started having these real like existential moments. Like, am I being a quitter? I haven't even started, but am I self-selecting out of what I think is tough? And if I am, why? Do I think it's too tough? Do I think I can't do it? And the only way to figure out if, you know, you can or not is to do it. So I started just kind of, you know, peer pressuring myself and bullying myself. And lo and behold, ended up getting in, you know, thankfully. And so it was an amazing experience and kind of a crazy ride, right? So I went in '98. Rumsfeld was downsizing the Army.
Let's hop back real quick.
Yeah.
I love to hear about the recruiting stories, because everybody's got a different recruiting story. So what was your recruiting story, or did you self-recruit?
Oh man, you know, so this is gonna probably, you know, it's gonna maybe lower my bar, and hopefully by the end of the podcast, I'm gonna bring my bar back up in the eyes of your audiences, because I was not, you know, a patriot. I was not brave. I didn't know what I was getting into. You know, one of my really, you know, my parents were not wealthy. And one of my good friends, he came from a military family, and his father had gone to West Point. He was going to go play baseball at West Point. And he told me one day, like, you should come with me. And that was kind of when I was like, started learning more about it. I didn't know a lot about it at the time. But as I learned more about it, I was like, this seems like an interesting challenge, something that would really make me explore myself. But remember, 1990s, Rumsfeld's downsizing the military. And so he kept saying like, hey, look, you know, we won't have to pay for college. People were getting paid like 80 grand just to give up their commission. So they weren't even serving their full 5 years after the academies. And so he kind of sold me on this idea of a really great education, a lot of history, which we can be proud of, but we probably weren't going to serve. And so it was a little bit of that, a little bit of a challenge, and then a little bit of, the pride you see in your parents, like, oh, wow, you got accepted to an academy. Senior year, 9/11. I remember walking into my first class senior year, and up until then, it was traditional military academy. And you go through parades, you learn a little bit. A lot of it's about school. It's a great education. It's an engineering school. Senior year, walk into my first class after 9/11, and we had this like cartoonish full bird colonel, big jaw, gravelly voice, and we all sit down, and he's kind of looking around, and he had jumped into Grenada, and he was like, "Well, cadets, you're all going to war." It was like, that's when it sunk in. Whatever we thought we were getting into is not what we were about to get into. And that kind of career in the military took a quick right into something totally different. And, it's something that I cherish, not for the reasons that people think, you don't enjoy being in those situations, but I cherish for what it taught me about people. Watching an 18-year-old kid who a lot of people, probably forsook or probably thought, wouldn't amount to nothing, negotiate ceasefires with tribal leaders. I mean, you take on an entirely different perspective of people and their capabilities when lives are on the line. And so I'm thankful for West Point, taking me on that journey. Didn't know what I was getting into, but hopefully I made the best of it.
Now, because you're such a good soldier, you probably didn't have to march at all or march off any demerits.
So I never had any, they call it walking hours. I never had any hours. I graduated without any hours. And I managed to usually get out of parading, pretty well. So I got married last Friday, and my best man was my roommate at West Point, a guy named Chris Matthews, amazing human being. And part of his speech was me getting out of parading. And so I found ways to, be in the gym instead of parading as much as possible. So I love the doing of the military. I wasn't so committed to, the pomp and circumstance of an academy.
So now, what job did you take and why?
Yeah, this will be interesting for the rest of our conversation. Somebody kind of asked me, talk to me about kind of your career progression. I said, well, I've basically made a career out of getting and hopefully thriving in jobs I'm probably utterly not qualified for. And so I actually, so when you commission out of West Point, you do branch selection. I selected field artillery, not because I had any draw to it, but because all my friends, picked field artillery, and we all wanted to go together. And so 13 Fox, I was a forward observer. And so, for those of the, for the people on this call watching that maybe aren't familiar with all these terms, I basically would call for fire with an infantry unit. And so when we, so right after FAOBC at Fort Sill, I went to Ranger School, and then, came back and I got stationed at Fort Hood because they were looking to deploy. Yeah. And so they were like, hey, you can either, try to go, either a Ranger bat, or you can actually go down to Fort Hood and, basically deploy right away. And so I ended up going to Fort Hood, and we deployed that summer. So it's the summer of 2003. So graduated West Point 2002, FAOBC, Ranger School, right into a deployment. And we actually deployed with the 82nd. And so we were a mech infantry unit, basically 1-9 cav at Fort Hood. But they, basically the 82nd needed just one company. And so we were one company that just got selected, roll of the dice, and deployed before the entire division and the brigade. And so went over with the 82nd. We had a couple injuries, right out of the gate. We were right outside of Fallujah. And then, they didn't have, they hadn't set up all the supply lines or the logistics or the backfilling of personnel. It was still early days of the war. And so I ended up doing a lot of my kind of like, platoon leader and XO time with an infantry unit, which was great, because I love my infantry brethren. There's just certainly a different personality and a different dynamic to those units. And so was still able to call for fire, but was also able to really immerse in an infantry unit and kind of really get that camaraderie of, really being, tip of the spear, as they would call it. So incredible people. I mean, just amazing people I got to work with.
All right. Now, I've had a lot of amazing special operators on, Navy SEALs, Delta Force, Rangers. And I always love to ask this question because I had my friend John McCaskill on. He's a retired Navy SEAL commander. He wrote the book, Embrace the Suck.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I ask every special operator, what why did you make it through selection process while a lot of others rang the bell or didn't make it? What was the one thing that made you get through selection process?
So it's interesting, man. It's a great question, and maybe it's a good segue. I know, we talked about the concept of resiliency. There was only 9 of us, so we went into Ranger School in January of 2003. Only 9 of us made it straight through, and so for those people who aren't familiar with Ranger School, there's kind of 3 phases, and if you mess up on any one of those phases, but they still see potential, they'll recycle you and you try again. And so only 9 of us made it straight through without ever having to recycle. I've always kind of been driven by this idea, if somebody can do it, I can do it. And it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with my appreciation for human capacity for greatness. When you think about all the amazing things people did against all odds, who am I to say I can't do that? And so if Will Smith is, before he kind of became, persona non grata, he always had a really great quote about that. So if we get on a treadmill, you will get off first or I will die. And I've always had that mentality. Like, so you're walking the Tennessee Valley Divide and it's below freezing and you just want to quit. They call it LOM, loss of motivation. You can tell them you're done. That's like, the Ranger version of ringing the bell. Get on a, get on a truck and head back and get warm and have a cup of coffee. All you got to do is LOM. And for me, it was like, I would just keep my eye on somebody in front of me or somebody around me. And like, if you're still walking, I'm still walking. If you can do it, I can do it. I've seen somebody with a tab, by God, I can get a tab. And so it was really kind of having a very strong sense of self, but refusing to quit. And I think that sounds like some kind of, motivational speaking, like big thing, but it really is very basic. It's very simple. Think about a baby. You don't ever tell your baby, hey, maybe walking isn't for you. Maybe you should just stop. You will continue to encourage your child who is crawling to take their first steps relentlessly until they do it. And that baby will try, God willing, if as long as there's nothing, physically wrong, they will continue to try. They will be the best version of a baby they can be. We only learn until much later as adults that we can live below our potential. And there's another famous, quote around, human beings are the only mammal on the planet that will live below their potential. A lion will be the best lion it can be. A giraffe will be the best giraffe it can be. Only humans, will choose to live below their potential. So going through selection is not about, how much cardio you did, even though that helps. It's not about, look at David Goggins, he ran marathons with shin splints. You are going to get hurt. I tore my MCL, and you just suck it up, keep going.
And, my friend, Mr. Ed Milet, just put out a book called One More. And that's what they're talking about. They're talking about just doing one more rep.
Yeah.
And we're going to transition into business. The people that are successful in life or business or the military are the people that do just
one more. Yep.
Now, and I want to talk about that in a little bit, but I don't ever go into war details or any of that crap. So you did a couple tours.
Well, you know what? Actually, before you do that, because I think this is, before we move on past it, because I don't talk about, our experiences over there much, but I do want to talk about one thing, because I think it's lost on a lot of Americans, both people who see people who have served and both people who are transitioning out of the military. If not sponsored by them in any way, but it's an interesting book to read and I always recommend it. But Startup Nation is kind of about Israel and how their service has translated to entrepreneurship. And it's really incredible, because I remember talking, and I try to do some kind of mentoring here and there. And as people transition out of the military, they kind of think, well, I was a trigger puller, what possibly could I offer the private sector? Do I have to just be a contractor now? Do I have to be a, security specialist? If you were maybe in supply, do I have to go, work at Frito-Lay or something, And the answer is no. You can do anything you want. What you learned about leadership, organizational development, embracing the suck, doing one more, these are just as valuable as going to Harvard. And I'll tell you, there were really cool examples of this while we served all the time. Before DARPA got its act together and started sending really cool technology to the front lines, and we had kids spraying silly string to see if there were tripwires in a
Yeah.
building. And you had parents, church groups sending boxes of silly string out. That wasn't DARPA coming up with that. That was 19-year-old kids, kicking down doors, thinking there's got to be a better way. Entrepreneurship. We had people, our mechanics welding massive, rods onto the front of Humvees because they were not up armored in the very beginning, and we didn't have doors on ours when we went over, but they would, mount these bars to the front, mount a couple like hanging, metal, kind of metal chains on the front of it. And the goal was, hey, if you're going to hit an IED, let's trigger it in front of the Humvee instead of, where the cabin is. And that wasn't DARPA coming up with that. That wasn't some high-speed full bird kernel. It was just kids. And so like it really was very impactful, because in the craziest environment where lives are on the line, innovation flourished. Nobody had written a book or trained for Iraq or Afghanistan. Everybody had been training for force-on-force combat, with Russia or China. We were at NTC just doing crap that we were not going to be doing in Kabul or Baghdad or Fallujah, and we had to reinvent that on the fly and push all of that leadership down to the smallest unit level, and then empower them and resource them to go do what they do. And they had to figure it out, and it was incredible to watch. And so I always commend, our warfighters, men and women. Their ability to innovate on the battlefield is invaluable, and they need to understand that even when you get out of the military, those experiences are invaluable.
Yep, that's what I want to hit on. Now, like I said, you've two Bronze Stars, being a leader of men, but a lot of people would think, all right, he gets to the 10-year mark. In military, we know, if you hit the 10-year mark, you either get out or you do the full bitch.
Yeah.
So what was your thought process in getting out? And now I want to preface by saying that a lot of people that get out of the military, like myself, I got hurt on duty and I lost my vision. So if you can't see, you can't shoot, we don't need you.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who Richard was, because the whole time I was trying to be the ultimate soldier. And that was, the day I attempted suicide in 2012. But, they say also when you get out of the military and you step off base, the military doesn't give a shit about you. Your phone stops ringing, and you kind of, you're a man or a woman without a mission and without a home. So what was your thought process in getting out, and what was your transitioning like?
Well, one, I got to say, thank you for being willing to talk about that. Because, as we know, but a lot of people don't realize, you hear the buzzwords, but they really don't understand why mental health needs to be talked about. Because, we get shamed if we talk about it. You can't be depressed. You can't have anxiety. You can't feel like taking your life, and you certainly can't talk about it. Well, there's people having those feelings right now. And the more you're honest about your journey, the more you can interdict their journey and hopefully avoid, some of that same tragedy. And so thank you for being so open and honest about it. We need more of that. We need more, kind of breaking down that wall. You can be an amazing soldier. You can be an amazing father. You don't have to be a hard ass. You don't have to be the toughest guy in the room emotionally. You can be vulnerable, and sometimes being vulnerable makes you stronger and will build stronger relationships. Because now I had a mentor tell me that a long time ago. They're like, look, the reason why you don't have a lot of mentors yourself is you don't open yourself up to other people for them to think you need to be mentored. You're like, I got it. Well, you can't possibly have all of it. So you need to, kind of lower that wall and say, hey, I need some help. And people love to help, especially when they're asked. There's an interesting psychological principle in that, where if you really want to build a relationship with somebody, ask them for help. Don't do something for them. Because people, and it's actually triggered in almost being selfish, where people want to help. Like, I love knowing that I'm useful to somebody else. And so I'll flip that around when it comes to, a lot of the friction in getting out of the Army. And I would encourage anyone watching this, that phone might stop ringing, but it always still works outbound. Your phone still works. And I'll tell you what, I have never not picked up a phone or not responded to an email from a veteran. You tell me you need something, what do you need? How can I help? And I guarantee you, we'll use the golden rule. 80% of veterans are the exact same way. And so it doesn't have to stop when you step off the battlefield, but it takes that kind of intestinal, that internal fortitude and that courage to reach back out, because people are busy. And this goes, for being in the military, entrepreneurship, being a good father, being a good husband, whatever it ends up being a good, wife, mother, being able to step outside of your own ego and your own situation and network and talk to people and ask people and be vulnerable and say, here's what I'm going through. And don't do that alone. Please don't do that alone, because it will feel lonely. But the minute you start picking up the phone and calling people, you realize you're not alone at all. And I wanted to be a part of that. I loved what I had in the military, but I was a little bit jealous of everybody in the business sector. It was like another challenge. Like I felt like, once you start getting to a certain level, they don't let you, kick down doors anymore. They don't let you do, the stuff that, I had spent, most of my active duty time doing. And you started getting that sense of like, you're about to make me ride a desk, aren't you? I don't want to ride a desk. I don't want to send other people into harm's way. If I can't be there with them, maybe now's the time for me to go do something else. And so that was kind of my thought process, is I wanted to try, because, the time you served, the time I served, we got, a lot of, generations of veterans, never had that kind of accelerated, learning curve in terms of combat training, deployments, recovery, getting back out there, doing it all over again. So, 1 year in the early 2000s, mid 2000s was like 5 years in the normal span of being in the military. And so I was ready for another challenge. I really wanted to see what private sector was all about. And I was always entrepreneurial, even as a service member, and wanted to kind of see what that was like outside of it. So I didn't have any bad experiences. I wasn't trying to escape anything. I just felt like it was a natural transition for me. I think that's probably maybe why I can be a little bit happier about it. I know in your situation, not having that be your choice you can make is a totally different paradigm. And I don't have the right to speak to that, because that really is something being taken away from you that's not your fault. And I think we need to address that as well.
Okay, so before we get on, I had a great conversation with General Petraeus on this show, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I want to thank our sponsors. As you guys know, all of my sponsors are 100% veterans, 100% of the time. Guys, I love my energy drinks. That's what I'm sipping on right now. Matter of fact, the one I drink is called Physics Zero, and it's no sugar, only 60 milligrams of caffeine, tastes like Sprite, and no crash. So if you love energy drinks, definitely check it out. Also, Operation Veteran Freedom. If you guys are interested in becoming an entrepreneur, especially in the digital space, check out OVF. They have a great 12-week course, and they will teach you how to get something onto a page from your thought process all the way to actually having it selling in 12 weeks. So definitely check out OVF. And of course, StreamYard. Thank you, StreamYard. If you guys want to have your own show, check out StreamYard. I'm going to drop a link. They're actually going to give you something for free just for trying it out. So now, Randall, I had General Petraeus on, and the thing we talked about, I asked him, I said, you train us to go to war, but you don't train us to come home.
Yeah.
And the TAPS program is shit. It doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
But now I have a lot of friends that are entrepreneur space in the military, like Bunker Labs. That's what we kind of need. We need to know how to write a proper resume without all the nomenclature on it and all that stuff. Because a lot of times when we come out, we write our resume. Oh, okay, you were 19 Bravo, 19 Delta, 11 Bravo. And they put it in the garbage because they don't know what it means.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
talk to us about, the process of getting out, and what was your what was your thought process in getting into the private sector, and what was your experience?
Yeah, it is, again, when I say, utterly not qualified for, I'm not kidding. And if a psychiatrist might have a field day with me, for as much kind of success as I've had, it was probably born from an avoidance of that rejection. I have never given my resume to anybody. I had to write it for business school. So when I got out, I went to business school and actually finally got my way back to UT. So I got my MBA at UT, hook 'em. I didn't know what people would think of me. Here's what I did. So I got out, and I knew I liked this idea of being my own boss. The Army will teach you that. They will teach you either love command and control, or you kind of feel like you want to flex your muscles a little bit and get out there and do your own thing. While I was in, it was all our own thing. I didn't, I think Petraeus was division commander of the 101st. My first deployment, I think he was doing the transition force, the second deployment, um, or multinational transition command. But I mean, anything above lieutenant colonel, pardon my French, couldn't tell us shit. We got ambushed driving into Iraq. And it was, you had more, combat experience, direct fire experience than anybody in your command and control. And so you kind of just say, all right, we got to figure this out. Small unit tactics. And I think I really embraced that. Like, I love that. Small teams, IEDs freaked me out. So we would always walk everywhere. We actually we were actually assigned to First Mardiv for a little bit as well. And they had a whole tactics that was born out of Vietnam, about living in, the villages and kind of walking around. And so we did that, in and around Fallujah and kind of Ramadi. And it was all about just these, you get to know your people really well, and you're walking around and getting to know the villagers really well. And you're not escaping back to behind the wire, because in this, part of the world, those relationships matter. And that was entrepreneurial. It was setting up, different, civil affairs actions, but then also doing this over here. And, we had the British contractors we were trying to trade with. And so it was all just making it up. And that felt like entrepreneurship to me. So when I got out, I liked that idea. Like, I want to start something, but I wasn't really passionate about any one thing, and I didn't really know what I wanted to start. So I said, well, I'll start with the people first. So I made a list of 100 people that I wanted to meet. There was no, oh wait, this person's too big for me. This person's too rich for me. This person's too out of touch for me. I was like, if I could meet anybody, who would I meet? And I set about trying to figure out how to meet them. And I tried to disarm them by saying, look, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to grad school. So I got out in January. I had grad school starting in August. And so I had some time. Everybody's like, oh, are you going to go party? Are you going to travel? I mean, no, I'm going to get to work. I felt like, I was behind the power curve. My friends are doing billion-dollar deals on Wall Street. I got to go. And so I started just trying to work through that list. And look, you get, it's the old school, candy routes. I always tell people, if you have kids, teach them social skills, teach them finance, and teach them sales. That's going to be the last great competitive advantage. I can find somebody that's good at technology, but somebody who's good with people and can take no and pivot and iterate their pitch and be able to talk eloquently, and talk up their pay grade, that's going to be invaluable. And so I didn't mind being told no. Made a list of 100. 20 people blew me off right out of the gate. 20 people didn't respond. 20 people kind of punted it, said, hey, maybe sometime, we can't right now. But there's a good 40 people who was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's grab a coffee. Thanks for your service. Let's chat. And it was always about them. Tell me your journey. Tell me what you did right. Tell me the mistakes you made. Where do you think the market's headed in these areas? What do you think about this? And I learned so much. And through that process, I ended up meeting Admiral Bobby Inman, former, deputy director of the CIA, director of naval intelligence. He was an early investor in Dell and Oracle and started a venture fund down here. And I started learning about venture. And I was like, this is cool. Like, if you don't have an idea, you get to invest in other people's ideas. And so I fell in love with this idea of know your enemy. Like, if I'm going to have to raise money from VCs one day as an entrepreneur, maybe I should learn the VC game now so I know what to expect. And so I just told him, I said, look, I put myself out there. My dad used to always tell me, You never get what you don't ask for. And so I said, hey, look, I want to be a fly on the wall. I'll do anything. I just want to learn, and I will look to add value any way I can. And I kind of had a plan. And so when you're doing, VC work, you're constantly seeing entrepreneurs all the time. And VCs are usually pretty wealthy, pretty busy. They don't want to do any, grunt work. And so I would get them to let me sit in on these pitches. And I knew I could add value, because what I would do is take meticulous notes. And I would go online and I'd Google, how to evaluate a company, how to, VC template for, investment or whatever. And then, market cap, revenue, this, that, SWOT analysis, all this stuff. You can learn it, with an internet click of a button, you can learn anything these days. So I ended up being quiet, and I ended up creating this portfolio of deal reviews. And after like a week or two, I gave it to him and I said, hey, here, I just wanted you to know, I know you're seeing a lot. I wanted to capture all this information for you just in case you needed it or you wanted to make an investment. You didn't have to recall it. And they were like blown away. Holy crap. Like, wow. And I wasn't sitting there going, put me in, coach, teach me this. Why can't I do this? Why aren't you doing this? I said, I want to figure out how I can immediately add value without being asked. And that changed the way they looked at me. And all of a sudden they're like, well, wow, you did that without even being asked. All right, let's give you more responsibility. And so I led with adding value rather than trying to extract value from them, because they were already doing that. They were already giving me a seat at the table. The least I could do is participate and do something for them. And then that kind of led to this angel investment group that had just started called CTAN. And they were having the exact same problems. And everything that kept going back in my mind was standard operating procedure, TTPs, all of these things that we just take for granted in the military to organize our efforts and our human power, our man and woman power, all the things that we do. We might make fun of the Army, but man, it is dialed in when you were trying to organize a lot of moving parts.
Yep.
And when you get into the private sector, you realize how none of that is in the private sector. Maybe a few companies have gotten it pretty good, Lean Six Sigma and things like that. But there's a lot of companies just kind of making it up as they go. And so whenever we were doing this thing with AIM, that we started looking at and sourcing new deals from this angel group, I noticed the exact same challenges. They had no processes. They had no template. And so I wrote a standard operating procedure for angel investing, asked the board, they were getting a new executive director. And I asked the board, hey, well, who are you guys looking for the next executive director? And they basically profiled Elon Musk. And I was like, I'm sorry, Elon Musk is not going to run your little angel network. And this is basically glorified secretarial work, but I'll do it. Here's a standard operating procedure on running an angel network that I just did by Googling and, being proactive. And they were like, holy crap, like no one's ever done this before. And I got the job. And they would have never offered it to me. They would have never, if I had said I want the job, that would have been different than coming with an SOP in hand. And so I think, how you approach situations, how you approach people, how you approach relationships, look to add value. Don't complain that someone's not doing something the way you want it done, that someone owes you more stuff. Come in, kick some ass. Not everybody's going to appreciate it, but more often than not, you'll move forward much further with that kind of mentality than with this, what does the world owe me?
All right. Now I got so much I want to dig into. So much. Because I just want to say, I actually had the author of the book, Echo and Ramadi, on here, and you guys were really hit the shit back then. But I also want to talk about leading with value, because my friend Russell Brunson wrote the trilogy about secrets, the trilogy secrets. And the number one thing he always talked about was, number one, lead with value, but also make sure you have a dream 100. And to approach those 100, not to take, but to give with value. Like for me, I don't think that if I would have said to Mr. Steve Sims, or Mr. David Meltzer, hey, bro, I'm a veteran. I got a podcast. Come on, show. They would probably look at me like, wow, what an asshat. But when I went to Mr. David Meltzer, and if you guys don't know who David Meltzer is, they wrote the movie Jerry Maguire about him.
Yeah.
And I said, David, I want to promote your new book. I want to promote whatever you got going on. How can I support your mission? People are more likely to, come on a little podcast like this because they know that I'm trying to lead with value and trying to give value for what they're doing. So is that what you're talking about, leading with value?
Absolutely. I mean, it's so much, there's lead with value, there's lead with authenticity, because people can smell that out relatively quickly. It can't seem self-serving. It's really understanding, your skill set, someone else's skill set, where that Venn diagram overlaps, but then also being respectful and authentic along the way, saying, hey, look, I really, I'm not trying to meet you to get a job. I'm trying to meet you to understand, what I can do better, understand how I can help, you, if I can do anything for you. Every part of every conversation should be that, how can I help? Doesn't matter if they ask for the meeting, it should always be kind of, how can I help? How can I help? And so the value can take on different forms. Sometimes the value is just being present, and that kind of goes back full circle to the conversation we were having before, listening, and just being there. I found that a lot of times some of the people that are, so far, in my mind above me and what I'm doing, they kind of miss just shooting the shit. They think that everybody wants something from them. So to just sit down and talk and not ask for anything is still adding value. You're being present and you're understanding that maybe they don't want to be asked for anything at the moment. And they just want to talk about sports, talk about politics. We're human beings, but we're social animals. And no matter how rich you are, how successful you are, you're still a social being. And so that value doesn't have to be material. It doesn't have to be an actual deliverable. Sometimes it's just being in the moment, authentic and present.
Now, like one of the guys I had on a couple weeks ago, he talked about how he just directed a movie with Mr. Ron Perlman on it.
Nice.
But
Sons of Anarchy, one of my all-time favorites.
But what he did is, for 2 years, he volunteered to help another director to learn, to be taught, and to teach him how to be a director. So sometimes, a lot of people think, oh, I'm not going to intern for anybody. Yeah. But a lot of times, like if you want to learn from the best, sometimes you have to either volunteer, like with this Mr. Branson event that's coming up.
Yep.
I don't care if they want me to take out garbage. They want me to switch chairs. Whatever you want me to do, as long as I get to be in the presence and learn. Sometimes you have to humble yourself and say, I don't mind interning. I don't mind giving myself my free time, because that stuff is, a lot of the times it's invaluable, the stuff you get back. You know what I'm trying to say?
It's so true. There's I think because it's funny, we live in a world in which we put on airs a little bit, and I want to be the provider of the house, and I want to be I think I can handle myself pretty decently. But leadership's more complex than that, and I love this kind of Albert Camus quote that I think it's basically like, don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. Just walk beside me and be my friend. And there's a lot to that, because in any given situation you may lead, in a given situation you may follow, and in a given situation you just need to be there side by side, and those roles can change quickly. They change quickly in combat, and you see it in a small glimpse in We Were Soldiers once, when the high speed big tough guy makes a lot of mistakes. And sometimes the unassuming people, they're extraordinary. And so you never know where leadership's going to come from. But I would say everybody who, fancies himself a leader should also understand how to be a follower, and also understand when, there maybe is a different dynamic at play. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of people to kind of wrestle with that, the fluidity of those dynamics.
So then how do you go from doing VC work to now getting involved in crypto?
Yeah, it's interesting. So so it's funny it's funny how the world works. And this kind of goes back to being present. I've always, and I used to tell my entrepreneurs this, I said, listen, you need to, because people like to game the system. So along my kind of entrepreneurial journey, I also started a group called Texas Venture Labs. And that was kind of my attempt to get back first, where I was getting, I was putting myself into situations where I was, kind of networking my way into work with Admiral Inman. I had networked my way into taking over the executive director role at the Central Texas Angel Network. I grew that to be the most active angel network in the country. I felt like I had all these opportunities, and I saw my classmates and I was doing this at business school. I saw my classmates and they weren't getting the same opportunities. So I said, you know what? Let's institutionalize this. So I started Texas Venture Labs with the idea of giving other graduate students kind of that experiential opportunities to learn from the entrepreneurial ecosystem or learn from other VCs the way I had. It was, one of those things where it's just being kind of present and then seeking out the opportunities to add value. And I was like, well, there's a hole there, so let's fill it. And I have a skill set to be able to do that, so I'll do that. But then in part of that, I actually, stayed on kind of as faculty for a year when I graduated and I was transitioning out to kind of help the program move forward. And I remember, teaching a couple students, I kept seeing people kind of play the game. It's like, well, somebody's looking, so I'm going to play my best. Oh, they're not looking anymore. I'll kind of half-ass it. Oh, hey, where you want me to pitch? Is there anybody who's in the audience? Why does it matter? Are you going to pitch less or different, or, you're not going to be as passionate unless there's somebody that you recognize or somebody that you know. And I'll tell you, in Austin, it's even more important, because in Austin, you don't know who the rich person is. You could be in a room pitching and the richest person is in sandals and shorts in the back of the room, not even looking like they're paying attention. You could be in class and be in a group project with somebody who is related to somebody who could put you on and help you be more successful. And so I've always thought, you never know who's watching, but you're always watching. And if you believe in God, God's always watching, and your legacy is damn sure always watching. So be the best version of yourself all the time. And it's interesting how serendipity works when you subscribe to that. So in 2009, when I was still, this is actually second year of grad school, I was running the Central Texas Angel Network at the time, and somebody had reached out to me and said, hey, there's a serial entrepreneur coming from California, wants to be an investor. Name's Alan Natowski, and can you kind of hook him up and show him around? So yeah, sure. So start talking to him, hey, yeah, you want to be an investor, spend more time with your kids, you're hanging up kind of, he had sold a couple companies before, was kind of looking at like the next chapter of his life, being a mentor. And when you're an investor, it's pattern recognition. You see so many companies, so many entrepreneurs, so many deals, you just start to pick up on things. So we meet for coffee, and after about 30 minutes, I kind of stopped it. And I said, hey, Alan, I don't want to burst your bubble here, but I don't think you're ready to be just an investor. There's just a certain fire in the belly of every entrepreneur, just like every operator, that's like, let's go. And I was like, I bet you're going to start another company. He's like, no, I'm not. And so sure enough, about 6 weeks later, he contacts me and he's like, I've got an idea for another company. I was like, I told you. He's like, you were right. Well, it was Funware. So I helped with the first $1.5 million to start Funware back in 2009.
But now I want to go back, because 2008 is when we had the huge market crash, housing crash. So you're starting to do something bigger even after the market crashed.
And that's
so
the theme.
Didn't take the negative. Yeah, you took the positive.
You hit it. And sometimes it's not even a choice of taking it or not, right? The show goes on, time marches on. We've got responsibilities. We got, kids, family, friends who need us. And just because you get hit on the chin doesn't mean you get to hang it up and take a break and go eat some orange slices at halftime. The world moves on. And so it's going to have its ups and its downs, and it's not really what happens in those ups and downs. It's more, how you respond to them. Right. And so, we were looking for opportunities to disrupt markets, and Funware was an incredible opportunity, because back then about 3% of internet content was consumed on mobile. So mobile was just becoming a thing. There was no app store. So any kids, watching this, this was, a long time ago when people didn't have smartphones, they had flip phones. And so, there was this idea of let's help large brands transition off of web onto mobile. And that's what Funware was designed to do. We built the first NFL app. We built the first NASCAR app. We built all of Fox's mobile application portfolio. We did the Sochi Olympics. We actually set a live streaming record for the most concurrent live streams for a live event. We've done the presidential election in 2020. We've done hospitals. We've done airports, stadiums, you name it. It was all about how do you give brands really robust mobile ecosystems to better engage their consumers. Well, I just, helped out with the first kind of seed round to start the company. Alan was the founder, along with a gentleman named Luan Dang and a gentleman named Alan Kane. And so they, cut their teeth, building this from 2009, onward. And I spent my time as a VC. Still was from, both, he's an ex-Army Ranger as well. We kept in contact, but, just peripherally, kind of how's the company doing, that kind of thing. And then kind of 2017, we started riffing on blockchain, and we started riffing on what was going on with crypto, because obviously there was a lot going on. And I started learning more about where things were, with Funware. And I got more excited, not even about crypto, but actually what the core company was doing. And Alan said, hey, you ready to hang up the VC hat and come, be an operator and build this company with me? And, I surprised myself. I was like, hell yeah. This is, being a VC is fun, but it's kind of like riding a desk. The entrepreneurs are the ones out there kicking in doors. As a VC, you're just kind of giving guidance, and ideally, just giving them the resources they need to be successful. And so when Alan said, hey, you want to come do this thing? It was a no-brainer, because I didn't think, quite frankly, the world needed another app to track the Kardashians, but what we were doing with Funware could have material impact on the world. And I thought that's cool. I can get behind that, and I love now, fast forward 5 years, that kind of one team, one fight, follow me, let's go. Amazing people in this company, amazing software, amazing opportunity. And where we are now is, how do we tech enable the real world? And before we get to crypto, we can actually talk about the metaverse. I like to, the metaverse, for those of you who don't know, is this kind of concept of virtual world. Let's find each other, or let's help brands find, consumers in the virtual world to basically escape the real one. That's not, if you can't tell, I'm a people person. I wish we were I wish we were in the same room and I could shake your hand and we could talk. And I think people feel that. Again, we're social animals. It always sounds good in the movies, this metaverse, Ready Player One. Oh, look how cool that is. And it'll be a way to find each other in a virtual space. But look, flying cars sounds really cool too. And it was been in movies since I was a kid. We don't have them because it is a very hard thing to develop. It's a very easy thing to do with CGI. So
like my friend Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah.
3 years ago, we were talking over lunch one day, and he's like, Alexa is going to be in your house, in everybody's house.
Absolutely.
There's no way in hell. But now it's every time my wife is cooking, set alarm for 2 minutes.
So easy.
Reminder, Alexa. So now it seems like, everything is voice, everything is video now. And it's slowly creeping in. They don't give it to you one big piece of the pie. Yeah. They give you sliver by sliver. But it's like, I never knew what an Alexa was. Now it seems like we can't get up or go to bed without talking to Alexa. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like when they start doing it, they give you a little piecemeal. And I think it's the same thing with the metaverse. They're giving it to you little piece by piece.
It will. The difference is, and this is the beauty of what, Bezos understood something fundamental that nobody else did. You could have invested in Amazon for 10 years below $100.
Yeah.
On 4 separate occasions, it crashed by 60%. On one occasion, it crashed by 90%. And the whole time, the haters were out. What are you doing? You're an online bookstore. Why are you building warehouses in the middle of nowhere? You're going to buy a grocery store? What are you doing? Nobody understood. He understood. He had singular vision that the economy that we lived in would become an on-demand economy. Nobody else saw it. Nobody of any material note. He saw it. And he built the infrastructure for an on-demand economy because he understood people's behaviors, our base self. Watch Westworld on HBO, and it's all about they're trying to get to what would you do if no one was looking. Alexa makes sense because it's tech enabling. Oh, Alexa's talking to me right now. Alexa, off. So she makes sense because what she's doing is tech enabling my real world experiences. We're not ready to escape the real world. We just want a better real world. So the metaverse is all about building a virtual world to escape the real world. What Funware is all about is tech enabling the real world to make it a better one. That's what she does. And I think that's what people are missing. Now, Metaverse is coming and it will play a role, but we've had it already.
Yeah.
Some of these games right now, Fortnite, Second Life, people that are old like me remember Second Life. Second Life was huge, 10 years ago. So it will come. You're 100% right. But what's really exciting to me is finding ways to tech enable the real world to make your experiences better. And so you think about like Minority Report with Tom Cruise is now actually becoming an old movie too. When he's walking through the mall of the future and things are scanning his retina and all the advertisements are personalizing to him, or using like Pokemon Go like technology, augmented reality to find your way around town, or see digital signage overlaid in the real world while you're still living in the real world, so you get more information out of things. We see this with airlines. You use your phone to, for your boarding pass. We have technology that allows you to use your phone to access hotel rooms. Location-based services is actually one of Funware's bread and butter. We can triangulate a mobile device inside a building, sub 1 meter accuracy, sub 1 second latency. So it's much better than GPS outdoors. Very hard to do. But when you have that, you can better engage people. Like I know what seat you're sitting in at the blackjack table. I know how long you've been there, but once you can do that, once you can find somebody and you can engage that person, you can make engagement contextual. And that's what Funware is designed to do. So all the things you described around her, so I don't say her name, and all these smart speakers, that's all IoT. And so the Internet of Things is this promise of infusing the real world with technology that can serve us. The problem right now is outside of her, we live very disconnected from that. When's the last time you walked into a Starbucks and said, hey, Alexa, do something for me? Well, you can't because you're not connected to it. Alexa, off. She still heard me. They're always listening. And so, I envision a world that is just seamlessly tech enabled. And that's what Funware is designed to do. So we licensed our mobile software to Atlantis in the Bahamas. You go down to Atlantis, it's an entire island, Paradise Island. It's 140 acres. Our smart hospitality solution runs the whole thing now. So you'll never get lost. It's all the way down to the palm tree. We know exactly where you are. You can have an ADA toggle, which the parents love because they have strollers and they don't want to go downstairs anyway. You can book anything that you want there. You can discover anything that you want there. And we haven't even begun to roll out things like contactless check-in, mobile concierge, connected to the housekeeping, security for the staff. There's so much you can do. One of our biggest industries is actually healthcare. So we tech enable the continuum of care. Nobody wants to think about their healthcare. It's so important to deliver a mobile solution in healthcare. They don't even call it a mobile app. They call it a digital front door. Imagine that, digital front door. So it's kind of like the metaverse, but it's not, because you still need to go to the hospital around a medical campus. Anybody from the VA watching this, talk to me. I want to try to give it to you pretty much for free because I think it's so important to deliver better care to our veterans. We can tech enable both the patient experience and the clinician experience to deliver better care. I'll give you access to bill pay, telemedicine, all your electronic medical records, find your way around the facilities, all your discharge protocols, rehab, anything you need to support your care. We put it into a mobile application. We've worked with everybody. Kaiser Permanente, Cedar Sinai, Mayo, MD Anderson, Houston Methodist. Virginia Hospital Center, Greater Baltimore Medical Center, all of the Dignity Health Network that's now Common Spirit. We're trying to get technology into the hands of people to what? Create a common operating picture. Remember Blue Force Tracker or the Command Post of the Future? All these cool technologies that gave you a sense of the battlefield, where all your people are, where the enemy was, how to basically make good decisions. We're doing that with mobile. This isn't about consuming content. This is about engaging customers.
Now, when a lot of people get out of the military, I think they said the average career in the military is, I think, like 4.5 years or something like that. So if a kid goes in, he's 18, he gets out, he's 22 and a half. They're more well-versed in what we are than a 53-year-old guy. So what can they do when they get out to start getting involved either in entrepreneurship or into some of the companies that you're talking about?
I will tell you, again, it's like that sibling relationship. You can make fun of your siblings, but don't let anybody else make fun of your siblings. That's kind of the relationship I think most people have with the Army. And for as much as the Army pains me in certain areas, they're pretty good in some others, and they're getting better. They're trying, at least. Education, man. There are ways to go to school. If you've served, there are a lot of ways to go to school. So I'd encourage people to take advantage of that, whether it's a GI Bill. Here in Texas, we had something called the Hazelwood Act, which is kind of like the GI Bill, but on steroids. A lot of states have different things for veterans specifically. So I would encourage people to find their way back into school. It's a great platform to figure out what you want to do. Now, sometimes economically that doesn't make sense, and I totally understand that. What you said, Bunker Labs, I know very well. There's a lot of groups where it's not going to take, you can still have a full-time job. They'll do, lunch and learns. They'll do events on the weekend. Go to all of them. I used to go to everything I could get my hands on. I would just, crawl the internet for, things to do in Austin, entrepreneurship. Universities are always putting on things, whether it's tied to being a veteran or not. And I would encourage people not to just do things for veterans, actually just do things, go to the university and see. I was going to classes. I ended up linking up with some teachers, and it was some cool, there was one ethical law class that I just wanted to check out. I was like, hey, can I just audit this class? Can I just come in and listen to a lecture? He's like, yeah, sure. I don't care. Come on in. I didn't even, honestly, I would have not even thought to ask, but I was like, what the hell do I have to lose? So I asked, and sure enough, it's a cool class. And I met some other students, met some other people. He actually had a guest lecturer that day, so I met that person. So again, putting yourself out there. I would say attend everything you can. And then, if there's this moment of anxiety that you will always have. I used to tell this to entrepreneurs all the time. When you're thinking about company building or building a technology, anytime you can take a moment of anxiety and turn it into a moment of delight, you'll have a winner. But it goes for your own personal journey as well. I'll go to a conference. I'm not a big networker. I don't actually enjoy it. I don't like being in a conference. I don't like standing in line and walking up to somebody and handing them my business card and, hey, how's it going? And let me talk to you for 5 minutes and then leave. I'm much more of a 1 hour coffee guy. Mm-hmm. I remember going to conferences, and the minute they were over, having that flight instinct, I'm out of here. I'm just going to run back to my car and leave. And I'm like, no, there's so many smart people here. Forcing myself to go up to one of the panelists and being, hey, Randall Crowder, nice to meet you. That's how I ended up connecting to the Central Texas Angel Network. A guy named Jamie Rhodes was a panelist, and I went up and shook his hand and said, hey, I want to, start coming to, some of your meetings. And it was just putting yourself out there, no ego, being vulnerable, telling them I'll take out the trash, whatever you need. And so I think as people get out, no matter what age they are, no matter what experience level they have, you have value to add, and you should put your foot not in the door, but through the door. Demand a place.
Yeah, and I love that. Now I've been in recovery going on 33 years, and I was always told that the best meetings are the before the meetings and then the after the meetings. And I think that's when success happens, even in business. Like when I was in the military, I always got there 2 hours early and stayed 2 hours late because I
Yeah.
success leaves clues, and I wanted to be around the winners. So I think
Yeah.
sometimes, even in business, like we were talking about earlier, sometimes you have to. Somebody once told me you have to kiss ass to kick ass, and I think it's true in a lot of different ways.
It is.
So
And
first of
there's
all,
nothing wrong with that. I think being we talked about this, we touched on it a little bit before, but this like dogs sense fear. Human beings always sense authenticity. I've never been duped into thinking somebody's a tough guy. I can read somebody in 2 seconds and understand what they're all about. Human beings have that. It's an incredible gift. And we always get in trouble when we go against it, right? It's in relationships. You think, man, there's something wrong with this person, but maybe I'm reading the room wrong. Probably not, and it usually ends up kind of going against us. But I think that's absolutely true. You don't have, being vulnerable and being open to these relationships and not trying to put on errors or not trying to hide what you don't know. I used to run these lunch and learns when I was running the Angel Network, and there's like whenever you're, so those people that don't know, whenever you're like raising money, there's always a term sheet, and before you get to actual executable documents, it's kind of like, well, here's how much we want to invest, here's what the valuation of the company is, the big terms. And they're kind of, it's simple. You could get it on 2 or 3 pages, but there's some interesting terms in there: liquidation preference, and all sorts of little terminology like that, pre-money valuation. And people that are angel investors are all successful in their own right, but they could have started a piping company for all I know, never raised money in their life, just done really good. And I would have these meetings, and it was funny. You put a bunch of chiefs in a room, they all become Indians. And I would have these this one kid, he was kind of interning for me, and he would raise his hand, what's a liquidation preference? And I was like, great question. And literally like half the room was like, oh, thank God, I've been wondering that for the last 6 months, and I didn't want to ask because I was too embarrassed. I thought everybody else knew, and everyone else was like, I didn't know either. And it was this really cathartic moment. Then everybody realized that everyone was putting on airs, didn't want to sound stupid, didn't want to ask a stupid question. And it took a kid being brave, wanting to learn, to take all that armor down and advance the learning of the whole group. And I think people just have to be able to do that. You have to be able to, be honest with yourself and others.
Yeah, like I was playing poker one night with the CEO of Westgate Resorts out in Florida.
Yeah.
And we're hanging out, we're talking and just chilling. And I asked him, how'd you do it? And he said, you know what? He says, I've been asked thousands of questions. How to get a job? Can I have a job? I need a job. But not one person ever asked me, how did you do it?
Yeah.
Amazing, because a lot of people, they don't have that. Okay, how do you do it? And I'm inquisitive. I want to know how you did it.
Yeah.
But a lot of us, we get around certain people, like say being around Richard Branson or anything, we'll get all tight-lipped instead of just saying, hey, Richard, how are you?
Yeah. And I love that.
How'd you do it?
Yeah.
And,
and tell me the bad stuff, right? I think that, it's unfortunate. You see this in universities all the time. They'll bring back some entrepreneur for a 30-minute keynote. And it almost presents this unattainable goal. I mean, I always equate it to what women must feel like when you see all these magazine models or Instagram models who, it's like, look, that's not what they actually look like. It's an unfair comparison. And I'm sure you're, probably dealing with that, having daughters. And I found out, about a week ago that I'm going to have a kid, and I just know that I'm going to have a daughter, and I'm going to have to deal with this. And it's like, that this is all fiction. And I think, for a lot of men, but also women, it's that same sense in entrepreneurship, where you're looking at these, very successful men and women, and all they do is tell you all the great things that happened. And I raised money from, Sequoia, and then I launched my company and I went public with Goldman, and, it was tough, but we always persevered and we built great technology. And it's like, I know that's not true. Like, you almost went bankrupt 5 times. You've been sued 3 times. You had a panic attack once or twice. You got a divorce during this whole thing, but you persisted, and you did one more, and you ultimately made it. You got a lot of scars to show it, and probably a lot of knives in your back. And I want to hear that. You know, what did you do to, when you couldn't pay payroll and you had to tell your employees, like, please bear with me, and some left. And then what did you do when somebody poached one of your best employees and you thought that was your one of your best friends and they worked with you, and they left you high and dry, and how did you forgive them? And it's like, there's all this like real good granular, just real world experiences to these journeys that unfortunately aren't always told. And sometimes, just to your point, you got to ask, hey, how'd you do it? How'd you get over this? How'd you deal with that? Tell me something nobody else knows.
Yep. And like, when I have people come on the show, like I had Mr. Steve D. Sims on the show, and he says, everybody asked me about Elton John, because he's best friends with Elton John. I'm like, I don't care about that. I want to know, what was it like being a 16-year-old bricklayer?
Yeah.
That's the stuff I want to know. Like when I had John Lee Dumas on, I said, I don't care about your podcast getting 1 million downloads a month. I want to know how it felt losing a tank crew in Iraq.
Yeah.
That's what I want to know, because I believe more people learn from the hardships than the successes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
It's 100%, spot on. And I'll take it one step further. I want to, I'm sure everybody knows at this point, but Zawahiri was taken out by a drone strike recently, and he was responsible for a BBID attack on our guys, and we lost 4 guys right outside of Havania. And it's there's one question that is how do you deal with the loss of people, and then there's another question is how do you move on? I'm not saying how do you forget. I'm not saying how do you dishonor. I'm just saying, how do you get up tomorrow morning and lead, the same group of people -4 and still get the job done? And, the same things in entrepreneurship. It's like, how did you do it? How did you do it? But then it's also like, how did you keep going? Why did you keep going? What were those motivations? And how did you, that's the burden of leadership. You can't, sometimes you don't have time to mourn. Sometimes you don't have time to think about it. And sometimes there's people depending on you to persist. And that's tough. And I think that's what people, another thing people need to understand, and it kind of goes back to the chapter of this conversation where we were saying just being present sometimes is valuable. Being a leader, especially, I think it's true in the military, but it's also certainly true in private sector. Being a leader is lonely. Because you can't tell people you're hurting. You can't tell people you're scared. You can't tell people, like, who do you talk to? And you don't want to tell your peers either, like, shit, man, I'm terrified about this operation, tomorrow. Or, hey, I don't think we're going to make payroll, this month. Like, who do you tell that to? You can't tell your investors. You can't tell your employees. You can't tell your peers because that's embarrassing. You don't want your family to think you're a failure. Who do you talk to? And so, those are the kind of things that really lead to a lot of also mental health issues, is keeping all that stuff in and feeling like there's no one you can talk to. But then you talk to somebody and a funny thing happens. You're like, man, I just dealt with that last month. I'll tell you what I did. And, all of a sudden you open up, if you're willing to be vulnerable and talk about it. Another thing is like miscarriages for women. That's a very personal thing for a woman. And then you look at the statistics and it's like pretty much, all women all the time, have had some exposure to a miscarriage, but they never talk about it. And it feels, very alone when it happens, and it's traumatic. And there's a lot of, other implications for it. And then they open up to their friends and are like, I've had 2 miscarriages. And you're like, really? What'd you do? Well, we got lucky on the 3rd one, or we did IVF, or, let's talk about it, or I, attempted suicide. Really? I was thinking of attempting suicide. Let's talk about it. It doesn't have to be a stigma.
Yep. Yeah. And I believe that you have some people are they get humbled.
Yeah.
And then they go for help. Yeah. Like I'm a big sports guy. I'm a big Kobe guy. And I love how Kobe said there was one night he was playing against Michael, and Michael scored 40 on him. And Kobe said he was destroyed. Yeah. But Michael said Kobe called him at 3:00 in the morning, asked him, what how he did it and what was his weaknesses that Michael saw.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you succeed, when you look at somebody, like you said, looking at your Dream 100,
Yeah.
What they're doing, trying to, do what they're doing, but also asking them, all right, you're doing this. What am I doing wrong? How can I improve?
And Michael told him, which was incredible. It wasn't like Michael said, oh, well, we might play again, so I'm going to not tell you your tells. It was that reach back, help the next generation. And I think that's special.
So, I mean, just imagine the Black Mamba talking to Black Jesus.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have been in either.
Be a fly on that. Yeah. At 3 a.m, no less.
Yeah. All right. So last couple minutes, talk to us. What do you think the future of crypto is? Because we see it shit the bed. And what do you think, where do you see yourself in the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah. So, crypto will be recovered. Look, it happens with the S&P. It happens with crypto. And I would encourage everybody, stop freaking out. Until zombies are running around the streets, this is not the big one. The market has crashed and recovered every single time. Bitcoin and crypto has crashed and recovered every single time. If all you do is play the odds, this too shall pass, and it will also recover. Guess what? You could more than double your money investing in Bitcoin at an all-time low just in the recovery. But most people won't think about it. They'll wait till it's 50,000 and going through 60,000, and then they'll YOLO in at 50,000. Well, shit, if you had played the game right and done what wealth managers do, a long-term view about building an asset portfolio that's diversified, about figuring out how to play in both up markets and down markets, you could make a lot of moves in a down market. And so, all of that requires you to learn first. Crypto, Bitcoin, the concept of blockchain, make no mistake, it is the single greatest innovation to reach the global economy since the Medicis commercialized double entry accounting. That is how big it is. But it's early days. I mean, it's a total mess. And guess what? When there's great disruption and great opportunity, there's all sorts of fraud and scam that is going to pull it down. And because of the way information travels, it'll feel like, oh my God, it's everywhere. Every industry since the dawn of time has been scammed. I mean, by and large, our public markets are not free markets. 80% of trades are done by machines. And guess what? Those machines trade faster and smarter than you do. They'll front run anything you do. 80% of trades on NASDAQ are machines.
Yeah.
So you got to understand there is always going to be people who will look to exploit. But that doesn't mean that innovation stops. And so, the internet has been a great proliferation of scams on the internet. I still get, contacted by Nigerians telling me to give them money. This will happen with crypto, and it'll be something else, in a couple of years. But blockchain as a construct, this idea of decentralizing things, this idea of you don't need a bank in the middle telling you what to do. I was getting married on Friday, and I needed to move money around immediately. Oh, well, this money has to settle. Oh, well, you can't send money to a third party without a letter. You can't send that money because the names don't match up. You can't send money to your mom because your name's not on that account, and you can't put your name on that account without a written letter that's been notarized. What the F, pardon my French. It's my money and I want to send it to somebody. Crypto takes all of that off the table. If I have value and I want to transact with you, I can do it and nobody can tell me otherwise. Full stop. That's powerful. Guess what else is powerful? Radical transparency. All these, if you're familiar with, market dynamics, dark pools, naked shorting, all these games that very smart wealth managers and hedge funds play to front run the market, can't do that in a world that's ruled by blockchain. You can't fake stuff. Election fraud, commerce, identity, data. Blockchain is huge. Now, the problem right now, is everybody's just, it's a .com boom all over again. They're throwing .com on it. Entrepreneurs are either cashing out or flaming out, and they're taking it to the house. But after the .com bubble burst, what happened? Out of the ashes of the .com crash rose the institutionalization and the professionalization of the internet. You had Google come out with AdWords, you had Amazon come out. All of a sudden, you can make money on the internet, you can buy goods on the internet. It wasn't about pets.com anymore. It was, oh my God, this is going to infuse itself into all aspects of business. That's what blockchain is going to do. And we're not there yet. That's why Funware, we're the first publicly traded company with a digital asset. We've got Fun Token that is on Uniswap and is start to come out on centralized exchanges shortly. But you go to buy.funtoken.com right now. We've got Funcoin, which is actually a regulated security token. We're the first publicly traded company to have both a security token and a utility token. And so we want people to say, hey, okay, here's somebody doing it right. They're not scamming me. They're a public company. They can't go anywhere. I'm not hiding behind an avatar. I'm right here. I'm easy to find. You know who I am. There's a record of me a mile long. And we report every quarter and every year on what we're doing and why we're doing it. That's going to be where blockchain goes. There's going to be a flight to credibility and a demand for utility that adds value to a consumer or a brand's daily life. And I think it's going to change everything. When that takes hold, brace yourselves. It's going to be amazing.
I love it. So I got 3 questions, and I'm going to have you out of here because I know you got a lot to do today. Being a newlywed husband, there's always shit to do.
Whatever she says.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, honey.
Yes. That's right. I'm right back in the military.
That's it. How do we find you? How do we support your mission? And how can we just help you with whatever you got going on?
I would honestly turn it around. I would ask, the best way to help me is to help each other. When somebody reaches out and maybe takes a little inspiration from this talk and it reaches out to you, please respond to them, pay it forward. That helps me. That makes me happy. If you want to learn more about me or learn more about what we're doing, go to funware.com. You can go to funtoken.com to learn more if you're into crypto. If you want to download Fun Wallet, you can go to funwallet.com. That's our own mobile application that kind of manages all of our blockchain ecosystem. And I'm easy to find. I'm Randall Crowder on LinkedIn. I'm Randall Crowder on Instagram. I'm, the Crowder official on Twitter because I'm also at Randall Crowder, but I lost my password. So who knows if I'll ever get that back. So Crowder official on Twitter is how to find me there. And just, please support each other, especially support veterans. That's truly how you help me.
All right. So second question. Now, normally this is my last question, but because of you, I added another question.
I like it.
I had one of the Iron Chefs on, Simon Majumdar. He's on Iron Chef. He's on all the, and he said we've lost over 100,000 restaurants in the United States since the pandemic began. So that means there's a lot of unemployed people driving for Uber, DoorDash, just trying to pay their bills. So if I ask the average person to do something in 7 days, they're never going to get to it. But if somebody's watching our episode now and we ask them to take a step in the next 24 hours, they're more than likely to do it. So this is a 2-pronged question.
Yeah.
If somebody is struggling with their mental health, what can they do in the next 24 hours? And the second part of that question is, if somebody is struggling with their business and they don't know what to do and they need help, what can they do in the next 24 hours?
Interesting. So ironically, the answer is the same for both. The closest, not family member, mind you, I'm not going to say family member, but your closest loved one. And that might not be blood relation. Your closest loved one. Tell them. Openly and honestly, just tell them. You're never going to be able to solve it immediately. But talking about it is the first step. You have to be willing to talk about it. It might be your wife. It could be your husband. It could be your best friend. But there is somebody in your life, because none of us are solely alone. But there's somebody, and maybe that you love them more than they love you, or maybe they love you more than you love them. But there's somebody who would listen if you really thought about it. Maybe it's a teacher you had that you have fond memories of that you haven't talked to in 10 years. But if you pick up the phone and you say, hey, you remember little Johnny? Oh my God, yeah, I remember you. What's going on? and just talk. If you can't do any of that, book and schedule a support group right now. Book it, like go. Like I put it on your calendar and go. Like, Tony Robbins talks about this all the time. When you are in state, you have to do something in state that you will have to follow up on when you are no longer in state, because you can't stay motivated forever. You can't stay inspired forever. You can't be like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. Sometimes a good example of that, not nearly as serious as mental health is, I want to get in shape. Buy that gym membership. Oh crap. I just signed up for an annual membership. I guess I got to go unless I'm going to waste that money. And so if you're struggling with something, you've got to tell somebody. It can be a group, a loved one, a church confession. If you're not Catholic, doesn't matter. You can still, go, you can find someone to confess to, but you got to get it off your chest. And you need to talk openly and honestly about it, whether it's how you feel you're doing personally or how you feel you're doing in your business. You need to talk openly and honestly about it with somebody in the next 24 hours.
Okay. Now, last question. I didn't know I was going to ask it, but I've been led. I believe in my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And I believe that if you don't feel close to God, you're the one that moved. So if somebody is struggling with their faith, what is something they can do in the next 24 hours to finally get some peace and get back with him?
Take stock. What are you thankful for? I think that grace comes through an appreciation, because like no matter how bad you have it, someone else has it worse and they haven't lost faith. And look, I kind of alluded to it before. I don't think, in my heart at least, when I think of what to me represents God, I don't think it's a matter of right or wrong. I just don't. I feel like that's a human emotion. My religion is better than your religion. You're wrong because I think this, or I'm Baptist, you're Catholic. That's people problems. The God I believe in doesn't waste time on petty shit like that. Taking stock of what you have. I get really mad being in traffic. And I think, you know what? There's someone out there that would kill to have a car and have the opportunity to be in traffic. Man, you can't believe it. I just graduated. You're going to deploy me to a combat zone? Well, somebody else is now, a double amputee, and they're skiing and smiling and living their life. Who am I to complain? There's just, I look around me, and I see people just joyous. They have so much less than I have, and they have such a better attitude about it. And if I can see one, just like that story about Ranger School, if I can see one person doing it, then I know it's possible for me. And so it's less about a conversation with God, and it's more about a conversation with yourself. It's looking around and taking stock and saying, thank you for a roof over my head. Thank you for camaraderie. Thank you for my children. Thank you for still being and breathing. It's a act of supreme luck and faith that we are even here. I mean, the odds of becoming a human being are astronomical when you think about it.
Yep.
And so we were the lucky ones. And so anytime I get down, and this is almost a tracking back to the mental health question. Now, mental health is more complicated than just your mood, but it can begin to get in the right direction. I always tell people it's hard to be angry when you're smiling. So smile even when you're angry. Walk down the street. I have this challenge with my employees. Never pass by somebody in the office without saying hi. Make eye contact and say hi. You're not too busy to do that. I do it now to strangers on the street. There's an interesting story about someone in San Francisco passing this man. It was a woman who was going to jump off the bridge, I think, and she ended up passing some guy, and he said, "Hey, how's it going? Have a nice day," or something, just real passing. It was nothing, but she felt seen. It was like, holy crap, and she didn't jump. and she actually wrote a book and she always talks about it. But it's like these small acts of kindness, you can do them to other people, but you can do them for yourself. Cut yourself some slack and really take stock of what you have, and where you've been and what you can give. You see these people who have nothing and they still, give all their money to charity, or they run these missions, and you're like, meanwhile, we're all out here trying to get more and more and more. And it's like, I'll give to charity when I'm a millionaire. And then you got somebody making 20 grand a year, giving all of it, to the homeless. And you're thinking, you don't really, maybe I'm missing the point here. So I just think, if you're trying to find a connection back to something divine and something that is greater than all of us, then be greater than yourself by being grateful for what you have.
Amen. I love that. And, I had David Meltzer on, and one thing he said was gratitude and anger cannot occupy the same space.
100%.
You pick which one you want.
Yep.
So,
I love that.
It's been a great episode. Definitely check out Funware. Google it. They're all over Google. So they have so many great things going on. Brother, I just want to say thank you. I'm so humbled and grateful for your friendship.
No, same. If I can do anything for you, please let me know. I hope this is not, I don't want to do this as a podcast and say goodbye and good luck. I hope we stay in touch. If you're ever in Austin, you got a friend down here. Hopefully we'll be able to break bread in person. And thank you for everything that you're doing from the bottom of my heart for veterans.
Love you, brother. And guys, just remember, like Oprah Winfrey and Booker T. Washington said, if you want to help yourself, help somebody.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. So remember, the 3 most important words in the English language are today I decide. So decide to be happy. Have an amazing week. God bless you guys, and I'll see you next week.